Here is something quantum mechanics has known for nearly a century and still cannot explain. When a particle is not being observed, it exists in a superposition, every possible state simultaneously. When it is observed, it snaps into one definite state. The observation doesn't just detect what the particle is doing, it determines what the particle is doing. Most people who have heard this know the next sentence. The observer collapses the wave function. And most people assume the observer is a human being. A scientist with a detector. A conscious mind making a measurement. Here is what physicists discovered when they pushed that assumption to its logical limit. The observer doesn't have to be human. And the implications of that are more disturbing than anything quantum mechanics has produced before. The measurement problem is the oldest unsolved crisis in physics. At its core, it is this. Quantum mechanics describes particles existing in superpositions, multiple states simultaneously, described by a wave function that evolves smoothly and deterministically according to the Schrödinger equation. But when we measure a particle, we never see a superposition. We see one definite outcome. The wave function doesn't gradually evolve into a single state. It collapses, instantaneously, to one result. The equation predicts the superposition. The measurement destroys it. And after a century of quantum mechanics, with 13 distinct interpretations currently active in physics literature, there is no consensus on why. At the 2024 World Science Festival, physicist Brian Greene asked 3 quantum mechanics specialists about the measurement problem. He got 3 completely different answers. Not 3 variations of the same answer. 3 answers that contradicted each other at the foundational level. This is the state of the field. A century in, still unresolved. The question that drove Eugene Wigner in 1961 was this. If observation collapses the wave function, what counts as an observer? Wigner's friend is a thought experiment that starts simply and becomes genuinely vertiginous. Imagine a physicist, call her the friend, in a sealed laboratory. She measures a quantum particle. She gets a definite result. Spin up or spin down. For her, the wave function has collapsed. The measurement is complete. Now imagine Wigner standing outside the sealed lab. He has not seen the result. From his perspective, the friend and the particle are a combined quantum system, and he has no information about the outcome. From outside the lab, the friend is in a superposition of having seen spin up and having seen spin down simultaneously. So who is right? The friend experienced a definite outcome. Wigner's equations say she didn't, that she exists in superposition until he opens the lab and looks. Wigner's original point was that consciousness must play a special role. The friend's conscious experience of seeing a definite result must count as something that quantum mechanics cannot treat as just another physical process. There must be a difference between a conscious observer and a measuring device. That difference, he thought, was what collapsed the wave function. Then researchers started testing the assumption instead of accepting it. In 2019, a team at Heriot-Watt University, led by Massimiliano Proietti, realized an extended version of the Wigner's friend experiment using 6 entangled photons and 4 observers. 2 friends inside separate laboratories, 2 outside observers making measurements on the laboratories from the outside. The experiment was designed to test whether the observations made by the friends inside could be reconciled with the observations made from outside. The result, published in Science Advances, violated a Bell-type inequality by 5 standard deviations. What this violation means, precisely, is that one of 3 assumptions must be false. Either quantum mechanics doesn't apply universally, or observers don't have freedom of choice, or, and this is the one that matters most, facts observed by one observer cannot be considered objective facts for all observers. The paper's conclusion was direct. If you hold to locality and free choice, quantum theory should be interpreted in an observer-dependent way. There is no single objective reality that all observers share. 2 observers, looking at the same quantum event from different positions, can have contradictory results, and both can be correct according to the laws of physics. Now here is where the observer stops being human. A 2024 paper published in Nature Communications by physicist Alexios Polychronikos at the City College of New York examined what happens when the observer is itself observed. The result extended Wigner's original thought experiment into a full chain: observer watching system, super observer watching observer, super observer watching super observer, and found that the chain has no natural endpoint. There is no level at which the observation becomes objectively final. Every observer, no matter how sophisticated, can in principle be treated as a quantum system by a higher-level observer. This means the question of what collapses the wave function cannot be answered by pointing at a conscious human being, because that conscious human being is also a quantum system from a sufficiently external perspective. The chain of observers doesn't terminate at consciousness. It doesn't terminate anywhere. A 2025 paper in Physical Review Research pushed this further. It found that Wigner and the friend don't have asymmetric access to the truth. They each have information the other fundamentally cannot possess. They reside, in physicist Eric Cavalcanti's terminology, in different bubbles. Not different perspectives on the same reality. Different, mutually inaccessible bubbles of reality. And there is a proposal, currently being developed by researchers in quantum foundations, for a version of the Wigner's friend experiment, in which the friend inside the laboratory is not a human being. It is a human-level artificial intelligence running on a quantum computer, an AI that plays the role of the observer inside the sealed lab, satisfying most of the qualitative features of an observer while operating entirely unitarily, making it possible for Wigner to treat it as a quantum system. What this produces is a picture of observation that has no necessary connection to consciousness. The observer in quantum mechanics doesn't need to be conscious. It doesn't need to be human. It doesn't need to be alive. An AI on a quantum computer can be an observer. A measuring device can be an observer. And according to the chain of extended Wigner's friend experiments, any of these observers can itself be observed by a higher-level system, producing contradictory but equally valid realities at each level of the chain. Physicist Carlo Rovelli's relational interpretation of quantum mechanics formalizes this directly. In his framework, quantum states are not properties of systems. They are properties of the relationship between systems. A particle has no definite spin in itself. It has a definite spin relative to this observer in this interaction. A different observer, interacting differently, can legitimately assign a different spin, and both are correct. There is no view from nowhere. There is no observer-independent reality underneath all the relationships. What exists in this picture is not a single universe observed from outside by a neutral cosmic eye. What exists is a web of interactions between systems, each one generating a local, relative, observer-dependent reality, with no level privileged enough to be called the truth. So what is watching reality if it isn't human? The honest answer, which is also the most disorienting answer, is everything is. Every quantum interaction is an observation. Every particle that interacts with another particle is, in the relevant sense, measuring it. The wave function collapses not because a conscious mind looks, but because any physical system interacts. And that interaction constitutes an observation in the only sense quantum mechanics actually requires. The universe is not a stage being watched by an audience of conscious beings. It is a network of systems continuously observing each other, collapsing each other's wave functions, generating each other's local realities, building the macroscopic world we inhabit out of a web of relative, observer-dependent facts that are never fully reconciled into a single objective picture. Wigner thought consciousness was the thing that ended the chain. The experiments say there is no end to the chain. Every observer is observed. Every fact is relative, and the thing watching reality isn't human. It never was. Reality is watching itself, and every interaction in the universe is part of how it does it.